Hey guys, and welcome to another Intercept the Modeler. You know, one of the funnest things I like about building sci-fi models is that a lot of these projects tend to bring back fond memories of my childhood, and this next one definitely does. For my next model, I'm going to build a ship from a 1970s TV show called Ark II. So let's take a second to reminisce here. The year was 1976. Gas was 59 cents a gallon, the average cost of a house in the US was $43,000, and one of the most popular cars at the time was an Olds Cutlass. On TV, there were 3 major networks, and one of the things most of us kids did at the time was to watch the Saturday morning lineup that they had to offer. These were filled with animated shows like Tarzan Lord of the Jungle, the Bugs Bunny Roadrunner Hour, and Scooby-Doo. But there were live action shows too, like Far Out Space Nuts, Land of the Lost, the Shazam ISIS Hour, and one called Ark II, which debuted in September of that year. The show was centered around 3 scientists and a chimp who traveled the post-apocalyptic 25th century world in a vehicle called the Ark. The Earth had been decimated by war, pollution, and famine, and the surviving population basically were back in the Dark Ages. Their mission each week was to use their technology to help what remained of humanity. Their technology included not only the Ark, but a jetpack and also a smaller vehicle called the Roamer. The show was produced by Filmation, running 1 year, and only 15 episodes were ever produced. One of the things I always wanted was a model of the Ark itself, and that's what we're going to build next. So let's go ahead to the workbench and check out the kit. Okay, so this is what comes with the kit. We've got the main body of the Ark that measures 10 inches from front to back. This is a 1/72 scale representation of the Ark. We've got the tires, the axles, and the antenna. Now this is a model that's produced by Larson Designs, and it of course is a resin model kit, and as with most resin kits there's going to be some cleanup involved. We've got some work to do down here and along the back side. But I have to say, for the most part, it's a pretty clean casting of the Ark. The only critique I have is I just wish the panel lines were a little bit deeper. I've never cast a model like this, so I'm not sure what's involved with creating deeper panel lines, but I'm going to remedy that situation here by using Tamiya's scribing tool. And this is something I don't have much experience with, but I'll certainly get my share of using the tool with this project, and I'll go into that in just a little bit. As for the color of the ship, it's mainly white with a black underside, so the paint scheme is pretty simple, and I'm going to use Mission Model paints for this project. Lastly, I wanted to mention a couple other pieces I'm going to add to our display of this kit, and one is this roamer. This is a little replica I got from shapeways.com. Someone told me about it, and sure enough, you go on the website and there it is. It runs about $24 to get this. I know it sounds expensive, but I figured I've waited long enough for this kit. I'm just going to go all out. So it's a pretty decent rendering of the roamer, so we're going to include that. And I also purchased a few 1/72 scale figures, which I plan to paint and make look like the crew. So let's go ahead and get started with addressing the panel lines. Alright, let's go ahead and talk about scribing now. The tool I'm going to use for this project is this here from Tamiya. And when you drag this across the model surface, you'll end up with a groove that's squared off this way. Now there are other tools you can use that are also called scribers that look more like a needle. They have a pointed edge, and they'll create a groove, but it's V-like, as you can imagine here, and it ends up, however, with some plastic that's off to the side just by the way it cuts through the plastic. When you drag this across the model, it scrapes off a piece of plastic as you go along. So let me go ahead and demonstrate on this piece of an X-Wing that I have here. Well, as we create our panel line, we do need a straight edge because it's hard to do this freehand. So I found this ruler that's flexible, and my initial thought was to take some masking tape and tape it to our model here and use that to guide our scriber. However, I came across another technique which uses this Dymo tape. If you're not familiar with this, this has an adhesive backing that you peel off after creating a label with this. You stick this into a device that embosses letters onto the surface. You can create a label, take this off, and then you stick it to whatever it is you want to label. But this is thick enough to be used as a straight edge, and because it has this adhesive, it's going to stick to our model, and that also means that it should do well against these contoured surfaces here. So let me go ahead and demonstrate now. I'm going to go ahead and create a panel line, say, along here. So we're going to take a piece of this Dymo tape. I've already peeled off the backing, and I'm going to secure it to the model. And let's go ahead and drag this across the surface of this piece, and I'm going to do so lightly to start with. make several passes here so we get a nice, good, deep panel line. And let's go ahead and remove our tape, and you can see we have our panel line there. Now our model is white, so it's kind of hard to see these panel lines here, so I'm going to go ahead and mark them off with a mechanical pencil before I start one. Alright, next we're going to go ahead and put our tape down. So I put on my lit magnifying visor and carefully use my scribing tool with the Dymo tape to enhance all the panel lines. And I also decided to add some of these panel lines that were missing on the model, the ones you see here along the front windshield and along the side. So I'm very happy with this technique. I can't take credit for it because it's something that I learned on YouTube, and I'll put the link to the video that I watched down below there for your reference. But it's really nice to be able to confidently use your scriber to create these panel lines without thinking that you're going to mess up. Now the one panel line that needs to be deepened and even widened if you can is this one here. Now this is a picture that modeler Mike Capps sent to me, and you can see that there's a pretty heavy demarcation here between the front nose and the rest of the ship. So the way I addressed it was to use a flat file and a saw. I carefully ran the saw as well as the file along the panel line and just gradually got it deeper and deeper. And what you can see here is the final result. So I wish I could make it just a little bit wider, but I think this is going to be about it. I don't want to mess it up or make it look too awkward. So, but you can see it does stand out as compared to the rest of the panel lines. Now as I'm going along here, I decided to make a couple other modifications, the first of which is to the nose. Now this is how the model actually comes to you, and you can see there are these two projections there on each side of the nose to represent the detailing that's supposed to be there. But what I decided to do is take my cutters and snip those off. I use this attachment to my Dremel to create these concave surfaces here, here, and here. Now here's a picture of the actual studio mock-up, and you can see that the detailing that's there are these needle-like projections that are in the middle of these types of antenna dishes. And so what I'm going to do instead is to create my own by just using strip styrene rods to mount here, here, and here. And I think that'll be a better representation of that detailing. And the other modification we're going to make now is to the front windshield, but just by simply adding some dividers. Here's a picture again of the studio mock-up, and you can see where those dividers are, and I'm just going to use some strip styrene rods and place them in the appropriate areas. So once the panel lines were taken care of, I decided to take some fine sandpaper and smooth out the rest of the model. You can see I applied some putty here and there just to cover up some surface imperfections, so I'm going to sand those away. I also used my Dremel to clear up and clean off some extra resin that was here along the bottom and sanded those away. And what's next now is to go ahead and glue on the dividers for the windshield, and then I'm going to use Stynylres's gray primer. I think that'll be a good base before applying the white base color. So for the window dividers, I'm going to use this strip styrene from Evergreen Scale Models, and this is the size here. And to size them up, I'm just going to put it right next to the window here and just cut what I think will work. There we go. Alright, so here we now have the Ark painted white, and as it was drying, I decided to actually take some of this plastic putty and fill in this panel line that I had deepened. The reason I did that is because when you look on the studio mock-up, it isn't a huge gap there. There's actually, what fills that gap is an accordion style fitting. I'm assuming that was just to relieve stress or pressure from this module to the rest of the ship. So it really isn't a very deep gap, but it is a wider gap. So as I filled it in, though, you can still see this panel line is more pronounced than the others. And so I'm pretty satisfied with the way that's looking. So if I were you, what I would do is I would put the Dymo tape right next to the seam that is there and run your scriber along that so you can just widen it. So the idea is just to widen it, not deepen it too much. Okay, So we're going to go ahead and let that dry. I have a little bit of repair work to do on the paint. In the meantime, what I'm going to do is prime the wheels and the axles. So working on the tires now, and the tires are painted with Tamiya's rubber black, and I'm just finishing off these metal coverings here with Vallejo's gunmetal, and just brushing it on here with a fine brush. There's enough relief there that allows you to easily just brush over it without too many problems. Okay, we have the vehicle now ready to apply the black. I wish there was a easy way I could tell you how to do this, but you just have to eyeball it. The black goes along the bottom and up into this front section, and has this particular pattern under the nose here. So you just have to kind of eyeball it and just kind of look at some reference pictures as you lay your tape down. Let's go ahead now and apply the black. Alright, so this is the way it turned out, and I'm very pleased with the results. As I peeled away the masking tape, really very happy with the way it all turned out. Mission model paints, I'm very impressed with them. They do go on quite smooth. The trick is, however, you do have to thin them. I'm not sure exactly how necessary this component is, but just make sure that you apply, several drops of thinner, because if you try to apply the paint, this is my personal opinion now, you try to apply the paint without it, I think it just goes on, it's just kind of thick and it splatters. So the thinner is very helpful to have. I'm going to announce to you now that there is a decal sheet that will be released with this model. So when you order yours, there will be one available. This kit did not come with one, and I worked with Chris to design one. And so the decal sheet is going to include not only the logos, but also other markings that, that are necessary. So that is on its way. And we have everything now masked off for the front windows and grille. Alright, well, this is how it's looking. We've got the front windshield painted. You can see the grille is also painted here. We've got the axles on. And so what's next now is to work on some of the weathering. The Ark was always seen roaming around an arid environment, and so we're going to be weathering the bottom part of the Ark as well as the tires with some desert pigment. And I also plan to darken up some of the panel lines with a wash. I'm going to go ahead and set the Ark aside for a little bit because I'm still waiting for the decals to get in, so I will postpone during any weathering until we get those decals. In the meantime, let's begin work on our 3D printed roamer. Now, oftentimes with 3D printed items, and I've worked with a few now, you'll find these fine striations on the surface. So the first thing I need to do is to sand it smooth, and then the plan is to paint it black with the silver panels. So there is a little exhaust port at the very back of the vehicle, and what I'm doing here is just using my Dremel to hollow it out a little bit. Okay, so here we have our roamer. I'm very pleased with the results here. One thing to forewarn you about, though, is some of the paint did come off with the masking tape as I was done with applying the silver paneling there. Luckily, they were all in areas that were easy to fix with a flat brush, but it's something just to be aware of. You might want to try an adhesion promoter. I'm not sure that would help. But luckily, as I said, it wasn't too difficult to fix. What I have left to do now is to apply the Tamiya rubber black for the tires. And one other thing I wanted to mention is you see this little line here that represents the edge of the door. I wish I had thought about this prior to painting. I would have scribed the line there, but instead I just use a marker like this one here to create that line. Okay guys, well I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me here on my YouTube channel or at interstellarmodeler@gmail.com. We'll pick up in part 2 as we continue to detail the Ark and work on the display stand as well as the figures. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.